Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for being here for this edition of the Albers Executive Speaker Series. My name is Joe Phillips. I'm Dean of the Business School here at Seattle U. Our speaker tonight is Jeff Musser, President and CEO of Expeditors International, and the title of his presentation is Creating a Culture of Opportunity. Before introducing our speaker, I'd like to invite Father Steve Sundborg, President of Seattle U, to the stage. Father?
Joe starts the applause because I led his daughter's wedding in Montana over the weekend, so he's a happy guy. Yeah. Hey, congratulate Joe. Yeah, you bet. I simply love the Albers Executive Speaker Series. I think it's one of the best programs at Seattle University. It's a signature program. It's amazing kind of program, the quality of this program. Just this year, we had Kurt Beecher-Daumeier, the founder of Sugar Mountain, which includes Beecher cheese. And then we had Elena Donio, the president of Concours, Jerry Stritsky, the president and CEO of REI, Doyle Simons, the president and CEO of Weyerhaeuser, and the last one was Brendan Peterson, the executive vice president and chief financial officer of the Alaska Air Group. And now we're topping it off with Jeff Musser, from president and CEO of Expeditors International. That's a great year. Congratulations to Albers and to its dean, Joe Phillips. It's just, it's hard to beat what this program is at Seattle University. We're just so proud of it. I do want to mention just one new award that Albers has received, that its Entrepreneurship Center has been named to 2017 Entrepreneurship Spotlight Challenge. It's one of 35 universities worldwide that is deemed excellent in entrepreneurship, so congratulations on that. You're closing out the year strong, Joe, and you're closing it out great on the Albers Executive Speaker Series. So let's congratulate Albers.
Okay, thank you, Father. So let me describe the format for you also. Our speaker will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll go to questions from our panel, which I will introduce to you later. And then we'll go to questions from the audience. So Jeff Musser has served as president and CEO of Expeditors since 2013. And prior to that, he was executive vice president and chief information officer for the company. He began his career at Expeditors in 1983, working part-time as a messenger, and progressed to roles in operations and brokerage with increasing responsibility. This included 10 years spent as district manager of Expeditors' San Francisco branch, and then to regional vice president of the Northwest, and then he became CIO. So with that, please join me in welcoming Jeff Musser to Seattle University.
Hi, good afternoon. First of all, I'm surprised that anyone is here today considering the weather. There's a funny thing that happens in Seattle. We go through this long period of 6 or 7 months of kind of cloudy, rainy weather. The sun comes up, and then everyone seems to disappear. So for those of you coming out today, seriously appreciate it. Thanks for coming out. Dean Phillips, thanks for having me here today. For those of you who don't, I realize you don't know my personal background. I come from a pretty modest family, quite honestly. My father was a police officer. My mother did childcare in our home. I have 2 brothers and a sister. And our family didn't have a lot of money for college. Matter of fact, college wasn't even something that was discussed as a family. It was decided that we would all go to work, we'd work hard, we'd be successful in our lives by working hard. Having said that, it's pretty, for me, this is a special moment to actually be up here speaking in front of some of the faculty and students, something I would never have expected in my career. So thanks again for coming out. I do believe in education, big believer in education. I have 2 children. My son is in his first senior year. I say first senior year because he's on a 5-year program, apparently. He's down at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. He's a pre-med student. And my daughter, she's an international relations student, and she is down at USC and just completed her sophomore year. She'll be headed off to the London School of Economics in the fall this year. So certainly very excited for my kids. I think education is very important. When I think about college in particular, to me this is a time to learn, pick up new skills, skills that you use later in life. And later in life might be an hour from now, but it might be 5 or 6 years or 10 years down the road as well too. But it's also a time to really mature in your thinking process. and to develop the opportunity to interact with others, look at things from a different point of view. And I can tell you that from looking at my own children, that certainly is happening in the college period. I remember when my son left for school and my daughter looked at my wife and I and said, "He's never going to make it. I'd be surprised if he lives through the first year." And I don't think she was too far off with those comments, quite honestly. But now, having seen him go through 4 years of school, just how he's changed, how he's matured, I think a lot of that happens in the college years. It's a fantastic time. With that said, what I want to talk about today a little bit is culture. And I want to talk about culture in organizations, and I want to talk about some things that I see happening from a culture perspective in the overall environment. When I think about culture, culture is something that exists in businesses or it doesn't exist. In the excavators business, culture's existed for many, many years. And we have multiple cultural elements. And those cultural elements, I'll read some of those off to you. Curiosity, pride, appearance, visionary, attitude, integrity, excellence, resolute, and sense of humor. Those are all things that are very, very important to us as an organization. And we spend a lot of time trying to bring new employees on and understand what those words mean to us. Because without an understanding, they're just simply words. So we spend a lot of time investing in the employees and helping bring them on board. But a strange thing happens sometimes with new employees, and I'm seeing it more and more. And we're living now in an environment where everybody thinks their main role in life is to disrupt. There's this big word about disrupt. And everybody wants to go to a new environment, they want to disrupt everything. And what I'm finding is that more and more people come into our organization and we go through the cultural elements and we talk about it, and immediately they want to change it. They don't take a step back and look at the 40 years of history, how the culture came into play and why that culture might be important to us as an organization. So I find that people are very, very anxious to change that culture. And I find that that seems to be true in life in general. People are willing to spend less time understanding what's happening and more time focused on changing things without the facts of what's actually occurring. And when I look at that, maybe some of that's the political environment, the supercharged political environment that we're in today. And this is not going to be a political discussion, don't worry. But if you're on the Republican side, you watch Fox News. If you're on the Democrat side, you watch MSNBC. And the two shall never cross. And we don't want to take any time trying to understand the other side. And I think that's really important nowadays, that we all take a step back and try and understand the other point of view. And I think that's a lost skill that's happening nowadays. We live in these 2-minute environments. We live in the YouTube world, the Twitter world. We get caught up in the social environment. And we get caught up in our social media. And our social media surrounds us with what? It surrounds us with like people that have the same belief and thoughts. And they continue to push those same thoughts into us, and we start to believe that, well, everybody thinks this way, it must be right. But if we actually step back, if we put our cell phones down, if we start engaging, we start talking to people, we start to realize that maybe there is a different side to the story. So I would encourage people to take time, really engage and understand in discussions. And don't listen to discussions purely from the standpoint of, I just want to find some nuggets in there, some points that strengthens my position. Listen to it from the other side. Listen to what other people are trying to tell you. Try and argue their points. I think if you take the time to do that, you'll be in a much stronger position to argue your own points. And you may find that your points are different after you understand things. But I think that's something very, very important. It's sort of a lost skill that I'm seeing. So you may wonder, how does that tie into culture? And why does it tie into the business culture? Well, when I talked about our culture and when I talked about some of those elements, one of the items on there is appearance. And appearance has a lot to do with the way that we dress. You can look in the audience, and there's a few excavators people here, and you can typically spot them by what they're wearing, the professional appearance. That's something that's very important to us as an organization. We just did an employee survey, and we went out and interviewed 16,000 employees. And we got a response rate back of, it was over 90%, Catherine, correct? 94%. You know what a lot of those people asked for? We need to change our dress code. And I sort of look at that and I go, I get it. I understand how people don't want to wear a tie to work. But what that tells me is that we're not doing a good enough job explaining why that cultural element exists, why that's important to us. And if we go back and we look at the early days of Expeditors when we started our organization, it was a dirty business. We're involved with the movement of freight. People would go in the warehouse, they'd walk inside the office, they'd track dirt across the floors, there would be stacks of paperwork everywhere. We wanted a professional environment. We wanted our offices to look professional. We wanted our people to look professional. We wanted it to be a place where people came to work and felt good about themselves. And the interesting thing is, when customers come and visit our office, and customers go and visit our competitors' offices, all other things being equal, they tend to give the business to Expeditors. And when we ask why, they tell us that because you look like you're professional. And if everything else is equal, I want to use the company that looks professional, looks like they know what they're doing. So the point I wanted to quickly make, because we just have a short period of time here, is that I think we all need to pause. We need to take time to understand why things are occurring. We need to take time to understand different points of view, and we need to be accepting of other points of view. And I think that's something that we're slowly losing as a culture. And the consequences of losing that, they're devastating. Go back and study Russia, or I should say the Soviet Union, in the 1920s. Serious religious persecution, murders, destruction of all the churches. North Korea, go try and say something North Korea that's not on one side of the aisle. Look what happened recently in the Middle East with the destruction of antiquities. That's all people pushing one position, not taking the time to understand another side. In this country, we have something called free speech, and people can speak about whatever they want to speak about. But a more powerful force is open dialogue. And I would encourage you all to engage in more open dialogue. And I think that's really the culture that we have as a country. It's culture we have as individuals, and it's certainly a culture that we have in our organization. So with that said, I think maybe a good time to open up for the panel and some questions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So I'll briefly introduce the panelists, and then we'll get to some questions. So furthest from me is Jian Lim. She's a student in our MS in Business Analytics program, and she's going to be one of the first MS Business Analytics graduates from Seattle University. She studied accounting at the University of Toronto and the National University of Singapore, and has worked as a CPA with KPMG and Ernst & Young in Singapore for several years before joining our program. And then closest to me is Daniel Verberg. He is a senior accounting major in Albers. He's past president of Beta Alpha Psi, which is the accounting honorary, and also is on the Albers Placement Center Student Council. He has interned with Amazon and will intern with Ernst & Young this summer in their audit practice. And then in the middle is Amber Olson. She is an alum of Seattle U. She is a marketing, sales, and planning manager for Pacific Market International, which is a maker of premium branded food and beverage containers. And she primarily supports the operations of the Aladdin brand. She has her undergrad degree from University of Florida and also her EMBA degree from Seattle University, and she also serves as a mentor in our mentor program. So those are the panelists. Daniel, you get to go first because you, after all, are closest.
Well, first of all, on behalf of the students, just want to thank you so much for being here, Jeff. Really appreciate it. So my first question is, unlike much of your competition, Expeditors has chosen to grow organically as opposed to through M&A. I'm curious what the thought process is behind this decision, and in the future, is Expeditors open to M&A, and does this have anything to do with culture?
Yeah, it actually has a lot to do with our culture. So our business at Expeditors, we're involved in logistics and we move cargo. But that business is very much a service-based business, and that business is dependent upon employees providing those services to our customers. When we look at the M&A world, if we go out and do a merger and buy another large competitor, it changes our focus as an organization. We believe the most important thing that we can do is focus on our employees. If we focus on our employees, take care of our employees, they will take care of the customers, and the customers will take care of the bottom line. If we go down a path of doing mergers and acquisitions, we get focused on trying to merge two different companies together, two different cultures, and we lose sight of our employees and we lose sight of our customers. So we think that organic growth model is the best way we can take care of our employees and it's going to lead to the success of our organization. And it has, over the roughly 40 years, it's led to tremendous success.
I figured it out. So culture is something that is inherent and true to who a company wants to embody. I'm curious what cultural evolution looks like within an organization. You don't want to lose touch with the things that matter most, but as a company grows and expands and the people change, do you ever consider cultural evolution, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think cultural evolution will always happen. I think cultural revolution would be a real negative for our organization. If I look at our cultural elements that we have, and when we put those on paper probably 25 years ago, there's only been one change to it, and the only thing that we've ever added to it was curiosity. We always thought it was part of our organization. We thought it was important for employees to ask questions, ask why, but it wasn't on the paper, and we thought it was important to write that down. But I'll tell you that each of those items, they do evolve. The meaning of those items evolve, but the general item tends to stay the same.
Okay. We talked about culture, so I'll continue with that question. Okay, we live and work, we all here, we live and work in a global environment, just like Expeditors operations. But it's a small world, after all. So people think alike, people behave alike, and many people desire similar kind of things in their lives. So that makes people, many people think that opportunity is a scarce resource. So do you have any thoughts or advice for the people? It's a common belief that opportunity is just a competition.
Yeah, I think I can speak on behalf of our own organization, and I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. When I started in the company, I've been with the company for 34 years now, and at the time we probably had 30 or 40 employees total. There was much fewer opportunities back then. And I look at our organization today, and we're roughly 16,000 employees, 180 plus offices. There is a lot more opportunities available today than there was back then. Now, there are certainly more individuals, but I think in general, no matter what business you're in, no matter what you're doing in your life, the opportunities continue to exist. Companies are dying for people that are intelligent, that are hard workers, that are good people. And I think those opportunities still exist globally.
All right, so in the annual report this year and in the letter to the shareholders you wrote, you talked a lot about people, process, and technology as the three key differentiators that create success for Expeditors. So my question is, as we talk about culture and people today, how do you balance prioritizing people over times where maybe process requires that you cut jobs or technology replaces the employees that you have? How do you find different ways to balance people, process, and technology at Expeditors?
Yeah, I don't think you balance them. I think you always focus on people first. And the process and the technology is there to support the people. So one of the things that's important to us as an organization is that we continue to grow. If we continue to grow, we continue to create those opportunities for our employees, and it avoids situations where you have to sit down and have the discussion about, do I have too many employees? I can tell you that's been part of our focus is making sure we're doing the right thing for our employees from day one. And in the financial crisis, Peter Rose, who was one of our founders and was the CEO prior to me stepping in this role, Peter was really questioned by the financial community because most companies, when the financial crisis was taking place, they were reducing headcount. And Peter said, absolutely, we're not going to do that. This will be temporary. We need to keep these people. These are important to the success of our organization. That's the approach we took. We were ridiculed. A lot of people said we didn't know what we were doing, and then it proved itself out about a year or two later that was the right approach. So our focus is always on the people first, and the process and the technology is there to help the people and help people do their jobs a little bit more efficiently.
So staying on the theme of people and development, one of the thoughts that I believe is that you guys spend a lot of time with your employees and developing them. And what I'm curious about is how you approach that to your population with regards to time of balance. It takes a long time to mentor and teach as well as do your job? And how do you embody the spirit of teaching and mentoring to help grow the younger or lower tier part of your organization to continue for them to want to stay and build careers there?
Yeah, you know, I don't see the problem is teaching the employees. We seem to do a very good job at that. I think there's multiple ways that we do that. We have a training organization. Catherine, who's responsible for our training organization, is in the audience, and her group spends a tremendous amount of time putting material together that's available for all the employees, and there's all kinds of classes they can take. There's also a significant amount of on-the-job training that takes place where supervisors, leads, and managers are sitting side by side with our employees. So I think from a training perspective in the education, I think we do a really good job on that. The bigger challenge, I think, is that, again, we're in this world now that people come on board and you know, they come on board today, and 2 months down the road, they want to be a manager of a department. And it just doesn't happen that fast. It takes time to pick up the skills and the knowledge to effectively do that job. And I think that the bigger challenge is sort of pulling the reins back and getting people to understand that, hey, your career is not going to happen in a 6-month period. Your career is going to happen over many, many years. And let's just slow down. Let's take the time to learn things, to grow in your career so that you can be successful in those roles as those become available. That's the bigger challenge.
As a CEO, I'm sure there are plenty of responsibilities and heavy duties that you have to deal with every day, I'm sure. And one of those responsibilities would be delivering bad news to employees sometimes, which is unavoidable really sometimes because we can't possibly have good news all the time. So based on my experience delivering bad news, I mean, how management deals with and communicates this bad news to employees really matters, and it has significant impact on employees' motivation and team spirit overall. So do you have any not-so-secret know-how of delivering bad news to employees as a leader?
Well, I've been pretty fortunate in the CEO position over the last 3 years that I haven't had to deliver bad news to our employees, and hopefully that continues. But I would tell you that it's not delivering the bad news that's the problem. It's the fear of delivering the bad news. People are often afraid to tell somebody something they need to hear, and they sit on it for too long. And that's something that I learned very early in my career when I was a district manager. I managed our San Francisco office. And I convinced an employee to take on an import manager position. I was convinced this was the right person. This person had all the skills. Until the person got in the role and they didn't have the skills and they weren't very successful at it. And it took me months and months to build the courage up to sit down and talk to that employee and tell them that it wasn't working. And when I sat down with the employee and I talked to him about it, you know, I felt terrible. I convinced this person to take this job and felt really, really bad about it. But you know what? When I sat down and talked to the employee and said simply that, look, I made a mistake. I put you in a role that you weren't ready for. His response was, thank you for taking me out. Because he wasn't happy in that role either. And what I found is that if you're just honest with people and you tell them the information they want to hear, people are pretty resilient. People can deal with bad news, but they need to hear it, and they also need to know what's the next plan. How are we going to recover from that?
Great, I get one more. Okay, so awesome. So I'd like to apologize in advance because the people in my age group are often looking for multiple different jobs in a short window. That's kind of the trend right now is people. So obviously building a culture takes time, and you've spent, was it 34 years with the company?
Correct.
So that's becoming more and more rare. So how does Expeditors combat that? Do you fight it? Do you look for people who want to be at a company long term? I guess what's your thought overall on this kind of trend and how you see it affecting the company?
Well, first of all, I don't think you should apologize for people your age that are moving jobs often. I don't think that you're necessarily the driver of that. I think that the corporations are the driver of that. I see a lot of companies that people go work for an organization and someone has taken a role on and they're very successful in that role and they're ready to move in their career. But instead of taking a risk on that person and giving that person the opportunity, they need to bring somebody in from the outside that already has that experience. And I don't know how an individual ever gets the experience in a role if a company doesn't take a risk on them. So I don't think this generation is the driver. I think it's the corporations that are driving that more than anything. But I think as an organization, we very much are looking for people that are looking for long-term careers, We want people to come work at Expeditors. We want to see them be able to grow, take on new roles, new responsibilities. If you look at our senior management team, many of those individuals, they started in the warehouse. They started as a messenger. They started as an importer, an export clerk. That, again, is just part of our DNA as a company. It's what we've always been. It's what we will always be in the future. But I think that's just a matter of sending that clear message and creating those opportunities for the employees.
So my last question. One of the things that, and you kind of hit on it, Daniel, but is this idea of instant gratification, and we hear that a lot, and you talked about it in the last question. In the means of kind of you showing up as a leader, because you've been there for so long, what would you say is your piece of advice for those that are hungry for quick advancement, and how do they hold themselves back for that right opportunity, or how do they build patience within themselves so they don't feel like they're a failure when they don't get something so quick?
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of time from supervisors and managers and the management team in general to keep talking to those people, keep explaining that they're headed down the right path, they're learning, they're growing as individuals, and the right things will happen. In my own career, early on, I worked hard. I worked a lot of hours, worked really hard trying to learn new things. And I saw other people that took other jobs on, and they may have made more money, and it seemed like they had other opportunities. And I was surrounded with good people that kept telling me, don't worry, what you're building here is long-term, it's all going to work out. And I put a lot of trust and confidence in those individuals. And I think that's building relationships with those folks and helping them understand. But I think it also requires us to be honest with people at times. I do new employee orientation, and one of the things I talk about with the new employees is what we expect out of them and what they should expect out of us. We're almost afraid to tell people that we expect them to work hard. We expect them to show up at work on time. We expect them to invest in themselves. People are afraid to say those things because they might hurt someone's feelings. I think that honesty is an important part of the discussion of what you expect of those employees. But at the same time, what they should expect from us is opportunities and growth. But we have to be honest and explain too that will happen over time. So I just think that's more about having regular conversations and engaging with them on a consistent basis. And we're pretty good at that. We're pretty good at having those level discussions.
I think it's going to be the last question. Well, okay. To create a good culture of opportunity, the process of giving that opportunity should be fair and justifiable. And for that process to be fair and justifiable, I believe that there should be some established evaluation system, for one thing. When a company is micromanaged, the evaluation tends to be very subjective, depending on each team's culture or the customs. And a company is centralized, on the other hand, the evaluation tends to be very biased towards the more value-adding departments as compared to not so value-adding departments. So how do we find the ideal balance between these two, micromanagement and macromanagement, for fair evaluation?
Yeah, I would tell you that I believe that we're a company that doesn't micromanage. We're a company that puts a lot of trust and confidence in our employees. Before this role, I managed I was a CIO and I ran our IT department. And one of the things I used to say to people all the time is that, look, just make a decision. It's okay if we make a mistake. Mistakes are okay. Let's just correct once we make the mistake. And I think just trying to create an environment where people feel good that it's okay to make decisions. From a review process, everybody has a formal review process. And they sit down on an annual basis and they write down comments. I think that's important. I don't think that's incredibly valuable. I think what's more valuable is just check-ins. And whether that's on a weekly basis, whether that's on a monthly basis, that you're sitting down, you're checking in with people, and you're talking about the bigger picture, not the one shipment they processed, but what are the things they could be focusing on to grow as individuals? What are the skill sets that need to be developed? But that doesn't happen in an environment where you're micromanaging people, and it doesn't happen in an environment where you just review them on an annual basis. It's really about the check-ins that take place on a weekly and monthly basis. I think that's where that development comes from. Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to go to some questions from the audience. So we'll have a mic in both aisles. And if you have a question, you can raise your hand. and we'll try to get the microphone your way. So the first question, of course, is Father Sundborg here in the front. Thank you.
Jeff, I'd enjoy it if you'd take us in a little bit to your company as a logistics company on a couple things. What's it like being headquartered in Seattle and why here? And then who are your competitors? Would we recognize them? And where do you stand relative to your competitors?
Sure. So maybe first of all, just real quickly, so logistics, what is it that we do? We move goods for companies. So almost any type of company you can think about, we're involved in the transportation of goods. So it could be retail companies, local company like Nordstrom is a customer of ours. Could be high-tech companies. Microsoft is a customer of ours. It could be pharmaceutical companies. So all different types of products that we're involved with. And we're involved from a transportation standpoint, air freight, ocean freight. We do customs clearance, warehouse and distribution, time-definite domestic truck services, a whole bunch of other things that go along with that. So why Seattle? When the company started, the first office happened to be located in Seattle. Much different company back then. Back then, we were involved with the ocean export of peas, beans, and lentils, something that we don't really touch today. But that was the first Expeditors office was in Seattle. And then at the same time, offices were opened in San Francisco and Chicago, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore. Seattle became the headquarters simply because the founder in Seattle had the most money. Most money rules. So that became the headquarters. What's it like being in Seattle? You know, Seattle's a pretty nice place. I grew up in the Bay Area. My whole life was in the Bay Area. Moved to Seattle. I enjoy Seattle. I think it's a fantastic place to raise a family. Beautiful city, mountains, trees, lakes. I mean, just a gorgeous place to live. From a competition standpoint, some of the names that you've all heard of, we certainly compete with UPS and FedEx. They're competitors. DHL is another company you've probably heard of. Some other companies that you may not have heard of, a company by the name of Schenker, a company by the name of Kuehne+Nagel, some Japanese providers, Kintetsu and Nippon Express. So there's a number of companies that we compete with. Where do we fit? You know, we're sort of medium-sized organization. Our focus has never been on being the largest. What we've always wanted to be is just be the best at what we do. And we've always felt that if we're the best, we'll have a little bit of growth each year. And being the largest was never important to us. Of course.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. My first question is based on the questions that the panelists asked. It's about cultural fit. All employers want the right cultural fit. And especially for youngsters, they're still struggling with what exactly is the cultural fit coming from colleges. So what does Expediter do to actually, does it have any strategy processes in place to help these new employees to learn and grow into this culture faster than just new employees figuring it out? And I also have a second question if there's time enough. So.
Yeah, so I think anybody can fit in our culture. It's just a matter of making a decision if they want to fit into the culture. So I think anyone can fit into our culture. We hand out a little card in our new employee packet. That card has those cultural elements that I talked about. But again, I'm a big believer that those are just words and they don't mean anything without explanation. So in all of our offices, at the corporate office, about once a quarter I do a new employee orientation, and I personally talk about what those cultural elements are, what they mean to me personally. I know that our managers and supervisors spend a lot of time talking about those cultural elements. But that's important to us because it talks about things, we talk about things that why work from home doesn't work for us, why the appearance is important to us, why integrity is important to us. We deal with a lot of government agencies, we deal with a lot of customers, we deal with each other. And we have to be beyond reproach from an integrity standpoint. All it takes is one person to do something really stupid and it destroys our organization, our reputation as an organization. So the best way that we think that we can help people with that is to continue to talk about it, continue to reinforce it, and help people understand the value of those cultural elements and why they mean something to us.
Jeff, you were a CIO for about 10 years, I believe, and you were elevated to a CEO. Tell us about that transition and how you accomplished to being the success you've become.
Yeah, so, again, from a background standpoint, I've had a lot of different positions within the organization. And, prior to the CIO position, I was a regional vice president. And I had 5 offices in the Northwest reporting to me. So I was responsible for Seattle, Portland, Salt Lake, Denver, and San Francisco. And quite frankly, if that's as far as I ever got in my career, I would have thought that I had an amazing career and I did really well for a kid with a high school education. The CIO position was presented to me because I was interested in technology. We thought that our technology and our business was sort of pulling apart, and we wanted somebody to reconnect those, and I had the business background, so I was given that opportunity. Going from the CIO position to the CEO position, I think having the business background, running a region, I think having that IT experience put me in a really unique position to step into the CEO role. And John, as you know, I was one of 4 people that were interviewed, and I think it just comes down to being passionate about the company, being passionate about the people, and some of it's just right time, right place as well too. So I think to me it's just applying yourself and just caring.
Let's see. Question over here on the right. Braden?
Yep. Sorry. Hi, I'm Braden Wild. I'm a current junior here. I'm wondering how you manage and hire for diversity. I heard a lot of good discussion from you about being open to perspectives and how you manage for those different perspectives and make them feel welcome and included in your culture.
Yeah, diversity is an interesting topic, and I think diversity fits an organization, and I think diversity is important to us as an organization. But I don't think it's more important than promoting people based upon work ethic and skills and ability to do those roles. So I think as an organization, I think we're very much focused based on promoting based on ability and not promoting just on diversity. And I think people see through that when you promote just purely based on diversity. But I think we're an organization that's very open. I think if you look at our organization, we very much focus on hiring locals in our local offices. We're not a company that sends a bunch of Americans to go work overseas. We want locals running those offices. We respect local culture, we respect local people, and we try and create an environment that everyone can be successful in. And we think that's how we've grown our company. I think if you look at it, I think you'll find that we are very, very diverse as an organization. Of course. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sure. So from the technology standpoint, there's a lot of discussion taking place right now in logistics. And this is the same discussion I have with the financial analysts. It's discussions that I have with all sorts of different people about technology. There's a belief that technology is not being used in logistics. And the one comment that I always say to the financial analysts is that it's almost as if you think we go back to our office and we use stone and chisels and chisel out airway bills, and that's how we move cargo. That's not what happens. Every piece of freight that we move requires us to generate documents electronically. It requires us to send information electronically to our customers, to our airline and steamship partners. It It requires us to send information electronically to customs officials in advance so they can see what product is moving into the countries and make a determination whether or not it's going to be allowed or not. So we believe that our business is very technologically advanced. We think from a system standpoint as a company, we're very wide in the systems that we have available. Very focused on ocean freight, air freight, order management, all sorts of things that we do as a company. And we think we're very connected with those systems. Having said that, where we sit today is not good enough in the future. And we need to continue to invest in technology and continue to add to our technology stack and our technology platform. Technology will continue to drive more efficiency for the organization, but it'll allow us to integrate in different ways and present information in different ways to our customers as well too. So it's something that we're not going to lose sight of as an organization. At Expeditors, we're very unique in that our core systems are developed in-house by our own employees. We have roughly 750 people that do nothing but IT for our organization. That's how important it is to us as a company. So, and it will exist in our future as well too, of course.
Next question.
Jeff, this is going to start out as sort of a logistics technical question, but I invite you to bend it toward culture if you want. I work for the Port of Seattle, and so as an amateur, I follow container shipping. And to me, it seems like chaos, that alliances forming and dissolving, people struggling the shipping line, struggling to make a profit, Hanjin going bankrupt, other people teetering. As you operate in that space, are you looking for the underlying order? Are you seeking to exploit the turbulence? Are you just hedging against the risks? And how does that translate into the culture as you operate with not only shipping companies, but the trucking companies and air freight and all these different markets that you have to operate in?
Yeah, one thing that's important is understand our business model. Then I think it gives you a key of how we work within an environment. And our business model is a non-asset-based model. Now, do we have assets? Yes, we have assets. We have $1 billion in cash. That's a nice asset. I'd like to have that asset. We own buildings. We own 2 buildings in Seattle. We own multiple buildings around the world. When we talk about the non-asset-based business model, it means that we don't own ships and we don't own planes. And the reason that we've purposely decided not to own ships and planes is we believe there are enough assets available in the world that we can take advantage of, and we can use those assets. That allows us to exist in an environment when pricing is moving up and down, and we can provide that same level of movement to our customer base. You're absolutely right on the ocean side of things. You have multiple carriers that are in financial duress. I mean, every carrier right now, quite frankly, is in financial duress. You have Hanjin that went bankrupt last year. And a lot of that is caused by the fact that there is too much capacity available based upon the demand that's available in the marketplace. And the way that we look at that, we want all of our partners to be successful. We really want the ocean carriers and the air carriers to be profitable and to be successful. Without them, we're not successful. But we've also chosen not to get involved in the asset side, and that's something that they have to deal with. They have to stop ordering vessels. They have to do a better job of anchoring vessels to control the space that's available in the marketplace. And I think they're getting smarter and they're doing a little better job at that. But our model is a model where we want to move with what's happening with the market. We don't want to get caught up in the things that are tied around to owning the assets.
Question?
Ed Muth, thank you for coming. Could you talk a little bit about the role that analytics plays generally in your business and perhaps how it's organized within the company, given that there are many areas in which you employ advanced technologies?
Yeah, I would say data is something that we've used for years, but it's something in the past few years that has really risen within the organization and is much more important to us. We're very unique in that we operate the same system globally. We collect data on a global basis. We have the ability to assemble that data, make that data available to our customers through an analytics platform. That they can only get access to the data, but they can see the data in a visual format, which allows them to make decisions or kind of see what's occurring and make decisions a little bit quicker. At the same time, we have teams internally that use that same data for optimization of supply chain making better decisions about where customers should place warehouses, what routes they should use for moving cargo. So data, and we don't necessarily have a formal analytics group today. We have folks that work in analytics in different areas of the business, but it's an area that we believe that's going to continue to grow and advance, and it's a skill set that's going to be required in the future, and more companies are needing that skill set.
Next question. In the back.
I can hear you.
My name is Bill Chris. I'm actually a big guest lecturer here at Seattle University. I had a question for you about some of the demonstrations that are happening outside of Amazon today. My understanding is there's a bunch of pilots that were protesting or demonstrating in front of Amazon having to do with race, with Prime Air. I was curious if you had any thoughts in terms of this ecosystem that is evolving around, as you said, not necessarily owning assets, but there's this whole ecosystem of pilots flying planes for tech companies delivering assets, and it's all kind of evolving, so I'm just curious on your thoughts about some of the stuff that's happening real time.
Yeah, I wasn't actually aware that was happening today at Amazon, so that's the first I've heard of that. That's probably more of an Amazon question, and I would tell you that I think Amazon as a company has been incredibly successful at the things they've done, and they've really changed the environment from an e-commerce perspective. Having said that, Amazon's unique in that most companies sort of understand what their core competency is, and they outsource things that are non-core. Amazon seems to work in an environment they want to insource everything. They want to fly their own planes. They just want to sort of do everything. So that's a little bit different environment. But Amazon's also allowed to do that because they work in a different environment than most organizations. Most organizations, real businesses, are for-profit organizations, and they have to drive a profit. They have to drive bottom-line profits. Amazon is able to work in an environment where they're rewarded for growth, and it's not so much focused on the bottom-line profits. That will change. That will change in the future. I've had multiple analysts that have told me that that's going to change, just a question of when. When that changes, I don't know what that does to e-commerce. Because today, a large portion of e-commerce and the delivery of goods, the two-day Prime delivery, that's being absorbed. It's being absorbed by Amazon. It's not being passed on to the consumer. When that model changes and they have to drive profits the way that other companies do, it may change. It may change entirely the way that e-commerce looks. It may change the way that they look at some of those services and decide that, hey, we should outsource this. This is not something we should be investing in. But I don't know. We'll see where that goes in the future. I wouldn't say anything negative about them because I think they've been incredibly successful at everything they've done. But they've got a lot of things going on, a lot of things that they're involved with that we'll see how that all sort of works out long term as well too.
Given the prominence of appearance in Expeditors' culture, have you had any misapplications of this value favoring form over substance? And how do you maintain a balance to prevent superficial valuations of underlying value?
So have you had any issues of valuing form over substance? I think we're like any company that we make mistakes occasionally. I think one thing that we try and do when we make mistakes is try and correct those mistakes. But again, that goes back to people being able to identify that they made a mistake as well, and then be able to sit down and put the right correction in place. But off the top of my head, I can't think of a specific example that I would point out, but I would just say that we're no different than anyone, that we make mistakes. Sometimes it's just a matter of fessing up to your mistakes that you make.
Other questions? Yeah, Father?
I'm interested about when you interview people to work for Expeditors, what do you ask them? What are you looking for? And is Expeditors looking for people that are something different from what other companies are looking for? Is there sort of a differentiator in terms of what you're looking for in an employee different from other companies?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I haven't done an interview in probably about 2 years now. It seems like in the CIO role, I didn't do a lot of hiring, and the CEO role, I don't do a lot of hiring. But I will tell you that when what we like to say is that we hire for attitude and we train for skills. So when we're looking for people, we're looking for people with the right attitude. What is the right attitude? Well, it's a can-do attitude. They're interested in learning. They're interested in growing. They want to build a career at the organization. They're not just coming to join the company to work there for 6 months. Not that that's what you're trying to do. That they don't want to come and work for 6 months. They really want to build a career. And I think that that's what we're focused on is the right attitude, getting people with the right attitude. What we do, it's not difficult. It takes time to learn the business, but it's not difficult. Anybody can learn. If I can learn it, anybody here can learn it. And if we find the right people and they have the right attitude and they're willing to invest, we think we can teach them the job. So it's more about the right individual than it is about the right skill set.
So you really clearly, and we all know what Expeditors does, which is predominantly B2B. Where do you see the growth coming from? Extending into various geographic locations, acquisitions, or going from B2B to B2B to C, or B2C, or C2C, perhaps? And I'd also like to have your views on the impact of autonomous vehicles on the transportation sector and how it would influence the whole industry and Expeditors.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with the autonomous vehicles so I don't forget that. As a non-asset-based provider, it's not something that we're going to invest in. So we're not out looking for trucks that are driven by computers. Somebody will invest in those assets, and we'll use those assets to move cargo, but somebody else will invest in that technology and purchase those assets, and we'll be a consumer or a customer of those folks that make those investments. From a growth perspective, you're absolutely right. Our business is a business-to-business model. We're not in the B2C model, we're in the B2B model. When we look at it from a growth standpoint, we look at the markets that we compete in, and generally we have less than 5% market share in any of those markets we compete. And each one of those markets, no one controls more than 10% of the market. So there's a lot of upside from a growth perspective with us just continuing to take market share. That we don't think we have to branch out and go into new businesses anytime soon. We can focus just on the core business and growing the core business. Having said that, we've recently created a new position, a Chief Strategy Officer position. A gentleman by the name of Phil Coughlin, who ran our global geographies, has taken that role on. And he's building a team. His team will be staffed with somewhere between 8 and 12 people. And they're going to be focused on forward-looking and future opportunities. So maybe new markets, but we're doing that because we think that presents an opportunity down the road, not because it's something that we have to do. We still see tremendous upside growth potential in the core business today. Of course.
A question in the back.
Hi, I'm Lee, and I'm an MBA student here. And as you mentioned about the right attitude, encouraged to learn and to grow with the company. And I wonder, as a leader of the company, what do you do to encourage your employees to culture that that kind of attitude? And how do you convey that kind of message to tell them that, or how they can tell you that they would like to learn, but there's no opportunity for them to grow or to learn?
Yeah, I don't, it's interesting. I don't think we have to spend a tremendous amount of time coaching people into growth opportunities. That's sort of a self-selection that people make. I think when people come on board the company, they see other individuals that are growing, that are taking on new roles, and those people quickly make the decision that, that's something that I might be interested in. I think I have those skill sets. I think I'd like to invest in my career. I'd like to take those skills on. Having said that, there are lots of people in our organization that are very, very happy doing a desk level job. And those people are incredibly important to us. And we're perfectly happy with those folks doing those jobs as well too. So I don't think we have to spend a lot of time coaching and guiding people for growth opportunities. I think they self-select, and then we create the environment which allows them to grow. So I hope that sort of makes sense, but I think people on their own make that decision, and we create the environment that allows them to take advantage of it through training and through the opportunities that exist.
One more question.
Thank you. Chris Dorling, I'm in the MBA program here. Could you, back to the technology theme, could you talk about IoT and the role that that may have in enabling more efficiencies in the logistics business?
Sure can, yeah. So IoT, for those that aren't familiar, is the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is centered around this concept of having connected devices. And the connected devices take information and send information back. So if you think about a supply chain and you think about moving goods from point A to point B, it usually involves individuals that have to go into a system and key information in. And they have to say that goods have arrived, goods have departed. They key that information into the system along the way. Some companies, some of the integrators, companies like FedEx, they have scanners, and they'll scan product. And they'll say that it's arrived at the distribution center, it's on the truck, here's the scan when it was delivered, and they'll collect information that way. The concept of Internet of Things, how I think it plays in our environment, and by the way, this is something we're already working on, is using those connected devices to collect that information as shipments are moving. So we've built a platform, we call it our Secured Services. Secured Services today uses cell-based devices. Think of a cell phone, a device like a cell phone. That device is attached to a piece of cargo, and that device checks in and sends us information, and it can be configured. It can be configured to send information every 30 seconds. It can send information every 5 minutes. And that's just a function of how long the battery will last on the device. That's an example of the Internet of Things. We built that platform because we knew that there were certain shipments or high-value shipments that needed to be tracked, and we needed to know where they were at all times. But we're interested in that more from the Internet of Things. We want to understand how we can use these connected devices, how we can collect that information, and how we can know exactly what's happening with cargo. And if you think about it from the world that maybe a FedEx is in today, where they scan cargo, that's fantastic. You know what's happening based upon the last scan. But wouldn't it be better to know exactly where that cargo is or where it was 30 seconds ago? That's where I think the Internet of Things plays, and that's where it ties into the supply chain. So it's something that we've already built with our secured platform, and we're using that data today. And as the cost of those devices goes down, they'll begin to be connected to more and more cargo.
Well, let's thank Jeff Musser for being with us tonight. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you coming up to campus to do this. This is our last event of the year, so we'll look forward to seeing you in the fall for the speaker series. So thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.